Hi, this is Graphically Alex coming at you with all things fat related. If that's something that interests you, please subscribe. I love to have you. Today, I'm going to get on here and complain again. I'm just kidding. I am going to read about the small fat complex, which is interesting as I am currently a small fat. I wanted to go ahead and say, though, I am really digging deep here. I really am. Like, I'm struggling. This is like we're starting to pull out of a turnip here, pull blood out of a turnip type of feeling. So I'm going to go to the gym tonight, but I worked all day, did all the stuff. Oh my God, you guys. I'm wearing Georgia. I wear this all the time now because I feel like it's becoming like a weird comfort thing. But I swear I'm going to wash it. I'm going to wear it to the gym and then I'm going to wash it. I do wash it. I promise. But I filmed yesterday. I filmed like a little bit ahead because I'm trying to like do stuff differently. And I literally was like, I don't even know. I don't even know, you guys. I'm just like a mess, honestly. Okay, whatever. Let's do this. The small fat complex and body positivity. This is old. This is from 2015. So what I do want to say too is there isn't a lot of stuff happening in December. I'm sure you're not surprised. December is not exactly like, most of the fat acceptance people, they're probably just kind of taking a break or eating a lot or, that kind of thing right now. I think we'll see a lot of stuff in January, which is typical. So right now, y'all are my other holdouts. I feel like I can be like kind of like more like less formal because it's like if y'all are trying to lose weight during the holidays or maintain or whatever, y'all are the troopers. Okay. And even if you can't, like I couldn't the past few years. Just know that I get you. I couldn't either. But I'm trying to like chug. Like it's tough. I really don't want to go to the gym. So I'm just trying to be real with y'all as we do this. But it's, ooh. Okay, let's go ahead and read this. Let's go ahead. After spending a little over 2 decades associating my body with fatness, I never would have imagined that I'd class as not fat or as a small fat by anyone's standards. I think this is her. Here. Okay. Yet when I discovered the body positivity movement and immersed myself into blogging, it felt like small fat was the first thing a lot of humans saw. You see, within fat acceptance bubbles on the internet, there's one body type that often receives a bit of flack. The small fat is essentially someone who might identify as fat or plus size, but who simultaneously fits into a smaller size on the plus size spectrum. The small fat is likely allotted some amount of thin privilege, with others sometimes deeming it a body type not fat enough to self-identify as such. Interesting. The word fat and I have a pretty long and complicated relationship. Even when I developed an ED and weighed over 100 pounds less than I do now, all I saw was lardy bits. The number on the scale never even mattered much because whether I was hovering around the 130 mark or the 231, fat was the main characteristic I identified with. Over the years, the word started to lose its negative connotations for me, of course. I gained weight, and I learned to feel comfortable and confident in my actual fat body. But in my early days of working in body positivism, I think I managed to make a lot of people feel anything but comfortable. Okay, so I guess this is her. Okay. I can see. Okay, back in 2013. Okay. "18 months into blogging and eager to somehow turn body politics into my life's work, I joined an international plus-size beauty pageant. At the time, I weighed a little over 200 pounds, standing up 5'9" and wearing a size 14. Okay. Yeah, I would say it's right on the line between mid-size and fat. Like barely fat. But really close to mid-size, in my opinion. The event's organizers had set up a Facebook page for all of the contestants to get to know each other, to get to know one another, and each day the admins would share photos of one of the women involved. On the day my photos were posted, I felt a pang of nerves, old body image insecurities creeping up unexpectedly. What would they think of me? Would they think I was cute enough for a beauty pageant? What if I wasn't the right kind of plus size? What I didn't expect was to be greeted with the association or with the accusation that I wasn't plus size at all. According to some other participants, however, I wasn't nearly big enough for a contestant meant to celebrate bigness. What do you know? You're never going to make it, right? You're never going to be that standard, whatever the standard is. I don't know how I feel about this personally. It's funny. One of you guys, Existential Gamer, shout out. She told me that when you're small fat, you're still like a little bit invisible, but it's not as bad as mid fat. And I see what she was saying now, because it's still like you're there, but not all there. Like, I don't know. I think maybe you get used to it, or because I was like deadpan invisible when I was mid fat, like absolutely invisible, especially being introverted. It was crazy. I'm not saying literally nobody noticed me, but it was basically like non-existent. Now I'm just like a face in the crowd kind of thing, but I'm there, I don't know. People notice me and that kind of stuff, but it is like, it's still this kind of thing, I think what I would say is the hardest thing about being small fat, which honestly, it's bad to complain, but I like to complain anyways. I'm kind of negative, as you guys could tell, but also I like to kind of pontificate upon like these social categories because I do find them interesting. What I will say about being small fat is that your body is basically completely unremarkable. So it's kind of like just there. Like, it's not impressive, it's not horrifying, it's not impressively big to certain people or average either. So it's just there. And I feel like it has made this time more difficult in my activism because my body has become such a background thing to who I am. One of the weirdest things about being small fat is I feel like this is probably the size where people see you most for who you are. They're not looking at you through a lens of disgust, nor are they looking at you through a lens of lust, right? You're just there. It's just all you. And I think there is a little bit of a vulnerability in that, because I feel like so much of my personality and things about me, they're so visible now and they're so at the forefront that it puts a lot of pressure on me to I've never felt this much pressure in my life to act appropriately as I do at this size. And it's because I feel like what makes you acceptable or not as a small fat is your personality. And it's sharp. Like, it's a very sharp feeling. And so, well, before I just felt like I knew my place. I knew as the duff, I was just at the bottom of the barrel. I know that's harsh, but I really felt that way. And I honestly was. I was invisible and all that stuff. Small fat, no, it's not really like that. You're not at the bottom of the barrel, but it really depends on you and if you're this dazzling person. So, or not, are you boring? Are you dazzling? Are you interesting? Do you have this do you have the personality we're looking for? Do you have the intelligence we're looking for? Do you have these things that we're looking for? I feel that pressure a lot. And I don't think I realized it until tonight. But I think it's just very, very loud. And I have some friends that are extroverted, and they talk a lot about how they had to develop, a personality, or like, quirkiness, or being interesting or funny, or these types of things. And I feel, as an introvert, I feel like that pressure is there. And I don't like it. I really don't. And so I wonder if it must be that at this size, that pressure hits a peak, or it's because your body is basically such a background presence. Like, I feel like if I was in shape, then my body would be more in the foreground again. And that would be something people notice. If I was hugely fat, that's the first thing people notice. But I feel like at this size, my body is not noticeable. And as somebody who has that complex past with E followed by the letter D, I don't have that cloaking mechanism anymore that a lot of people go to that for. And as an introvert, that is difficult for me. So I will just say, I wonder if other people that are small fat feel that way, like she was feeling, What if I wasn't the right kind of plus size? Would they think I was cute enough? Would they think this? What would they think of me? Notice that's the first question, I feel like it does. It's more personality contest at this size. Even as an introvert, which I never expected. I'm going to be honest, I didn't. Back then, I didn't have as much of an understanding about the many layers of thin privilege that exist in contemporary first world culture. I'd grown up hearing that I was fat from family, friends, peers, teachers, and school nurses. I didn't realize that my height combined with my big bones meant that at a 14, I was much thinner than all of the women in the pageant. I never really stopped to consider that I could still fit into Zara or Topshop's biggest sizes, or that airplane seats could accommodate my ass pretty well. That's funny. Yeah, I will say, I was I was just becoming a small fat when I flew on a plane, but I have some plans to fly again next year, and I don't have any fear whatsoever. Or that subway passengers never seem to mind sitting next to me in a 2-seat booth I just felt like an equal. I felt like we should all be uniting in solidarity. Women mistreated for being fat in a world where fat was seemingly the worst thing you could be. See, I would consider her fat here. I would. But she is definitely a small fat, you know. It's definitely giving small fat vibes. So it's awkward, I guess. It's a little bit awkward of a stage because you are visible. And I think that's what I want my introvert girlies and boilies to understand. Like, when you come to this phase, if you are coming from a bigger size, understand that there is that visibility there at a small fat level. And even as an introvert, you're gonna face a lot of pressure to be something, you know? Which, again, maybe extroverts, they feel that pressure earlier. But for so much of my life, I just was like, come as I am, and I don't give a fuck, and whatever. And I can't really be that way anymore. And I don't like that feeling. Just because I feel like it's so make or break. Honestly. It's weird. I swear, this journey is like living 10 different lives. Like, it's really weird. It's very weird on a social level. Anyways, like these different phases. I do agree with these categories. I really do. Because people do see you differently. I will just say, I don't believe that it's privileged or unprivileged. I think it's just different. You know, I think there's a lot of people that want to be small fat because they want to be known for who they are, kind of thing. I feel like a lot of people are that way. Just as there's people who want to be mid-fat because they want to be invisible, you know. However, I'm not for that, you know. I don't believe in fat acceptance, so I don't care if you're trying to be fat for some kind of social role. I still think it's bad, and I'm not going to stay here. But I will say it is weird, very much so. My time in the pageant world was short-lived, but my time as a small fat would pretty much last until I gained about 50 pounds. Oh, interesting. The body positivity community is an incredibly inspiring place where people are willing to engage you and converse about all the effed up shit we're taught to believe about our bodies in detail and depth. For the most part, it was a pretty welcoming hub of inclusivity. But in those early days, I could never help but feel some invalidation. Like, my opinions about sizeism didn't count quite as much as those of someone above a size 20 and with a bigger VBO than my own. I'm not sure what that means. What does that mean? Hold on. It stands for visible belly outline. That is pretty cringe. Ooh. Okay. On many a blog post and many a social media feed did the words, "But you're not fat," greet me. And each and every time I turned away in irritation, frustrated over the fact. So I think it's interesting because it seems like they pressure her to gain weight. Isn't that weird? I would not suggest that at all. I think that's horrible. But that's within the fat acceptance space. I doubt that society pressure her to gain weight. It's probably just being in this group, which, what a horrible group to try to be a part of. I'm sorry. Anyways. Each and every time I turned away in irritation, frustrated over the fact that anyone could deny something I'd finally come to love about myself. But then something happened. I gained a bunch of weight, in no small part because I grew to realize how much I actually preferred and loved my body when it was fat. Weird. I began to realize that the thin physique I spent my adolescence and early adult life striving for wasn't one I'd ever wanted. Okay, this is getting real weird. Along the way, people's opinions of me shifted. No longer did anyone tell me I wasn't fat. No longer did anyone question my ideas about sizeism. I did, however, start to understand what the small fat thing was all about. It's so interesting since she turns against people that are smaller than her. It was so weird. gosh, these people are fucking crazy. I'm sorry. I know that's harsh, but see, I feel like that. I'm sorry. Ugh, gross. Sorry. Now I'm saying it again. I'm not sorry. They're fucking crazy. Okay. See? Is there. Oh. Ooh. Anyways. The fatter I got, the more I loved myself. But the fatter that's weird too. Oh my gosh. See, this is weird. Like either way. I think that's weird. Regardless, I don't think how much you love yourself should be based upon how fat or thin you are. I think that's toxic either way. But you see what I always tell you guys, that the toxic ritualistic mindsets, they don't ever go away. They just change form, or they kind of like shapeshift. But the framework and the actual hardware of it is still there, even with the software update. Because that whole idea is a toxic ritualistic mindset. But the fatter I got, the more hate started pouring in from other areas of my life. Internet trolls started finding me. People started staring on the street if ever I wore a crop top. I could see the hesitation of those subway passengers as they deliberated whether or not to squeeze into the spot next to me. Airplane seats got tighter. Straight-sized shops stopped catering to me. And relatives who disapprovingly decided I was fat 80 pounds ago, well, they still disapproved. I mentally chastised myself for comparing my smaller body to those of women and men whose fat is the first thing people see. See, that's something I do agree with her on. I don't know if that's true anymore for me, which is crazy to think about. I think people are more likely to notice my outfit, how I act, right? Like my personality, like these weird, like this type of stuff. I'm going to have to pay attention to that more in public. I'm going to see. But I feel like that is what this is. I mentally chastised myself for not acknowledging my privilege long ago. And for equating the marginalization I'd felt for my body to the marginalization those 50, 100, or 150 pounds bigger than me no doubt faced, because clearly there was a difference. But despite this heightened awareness for the privilege I'd been allotted, and that I was still being allotted as a white presenting Latina with an hourglass shape at a size 18 to 20, I still felt frustrated over this idea of not being fat enough to identify with the community. After all, I was plus size by fashion standards when I began my involvement in the movement. I was just a smaller version of plus size than others. The key word when it comes to smaller fat, in my opinion, is fat. While I can certainly understand how fellow plus-size bloggers might have felt invalidated and offended when size 14 Marie was comparing her experiences to those of size 28 Nancy, marginalization of fat bodies seems to exist for all kinds of fat bodies, be they the size 14s or the size 28s and beyond. See, I don't know if I'd agree with that. I would just say there are correlations in general patterns for how people see you within these different categories, which I think is fascinating. And as I'm experiencing it, it is fascinating to see it shift over time. It's just interesting. Because, like, I've had a lot of people tell me, or not a lot, but, like, I've had people comment on my outfits more. And I don't know. It's weird. I don't know. I'm like, did that ever happen before? Like, I don't know. I really don't know. Maybe I'm tripping. When I asked Girl with Curves blogger Tanisha Awasti, who I've also seen people dub a small fat on the internet. I'm sorry if Awasti, if I pronounce that wrong, for her thoughts on whether small fats have a place in the size acceptance combo, she told me via email, I think all women, regardless of size, have a place in the size acceptance conversations. My readers range in size, and even the thin 2s have just as many body issues as the size 20s. I think as women, we all suffer from the I hate my body epidemic that's been haunting the female race since the beginning of time. That's the thing. Most women, and humans of all genders for that matter, are likely to experience body image insecurities because that's the experience we're conditioned to have. Okay, I feel like we're getting into toxic ritualistic mindsets here. Just as many body issues. Not everybody has the same amount. I'm sorry. And again, we have to remember toxic ritualistic people tend to project upon everybody, and especially upon women in general, which, you know, I do think women care about appearance and that kind of stuff, and I think there is pressure and all those things, but not everybody makes it about their weight to an extent that it becomes this. Okay? To where you're saying things like, I liked my body fatter. I loved myself more when I was fatter. That's not a woman experience. That's a E followed by the letter D experience. So I think we need to make sure that we're not conflating womanhood with E followed by the letter D, which I feel like that's kind of what this is doing a little bit. So yeah, maybe there's some body issues across all women, but it's not always going to be weight to this extent. I do think that E followed by the letter D is heavily normalized in women, but it is not being a woman. Okay. We're going to just separate those two things, and we're going to remember that it isn't normal. It isn't normal to hate your body. That is not a normal thing. Okay. Let's just throw that in the trash where it belongs. Okay. Add deeply ingrained sizeism into the mix, and you're left with a world in which anyone who can identify as plus size, most brands start their plus ranges at a 14, is likely the target of said fat phobia, while a fat size 28 person's daily encounters with fat shaming are almost guaranteed to be worse than a fat size 16 person's. Both experiences are valid. Oh gosh. Rather than criticize those who fit into smaller sizes but who are still likely experiencing fat shaming, I think in some ways it can be worse. I did hear one fat acceptance person talk about the idea of like being redeemable as a fat person when you're a smaller fat. And I saw that a lot when I was growing up. I don't know if that trend is still happening or if that's still a thing. But it definitely was a thing when I was growing up where I felt like people who were small fat got it worse or they were bullied worse. At least when I was growing up. I don't know how it is now. But like I said, I've always said I don't think these privileges are necessarily linear within weight. I just don't. I don't think social stuff is linear in weight. I think some things can change or get worse or better at the same time. It's weird. Okay. Rather than criticize those who fit into smaller sizes but who are still likely experiencing fat shaming, I believe we should be branding together to make sure that fat shaming isn't something future generations of women have to look forward to. Blogger M. Smith of Terrible Tumbles, who is also on the smaller end of plus, recognizes the importance of acknowledging one's privileges while still being able to self-identify as what one feels is appropriate. Positive representation of most fat women is minimal, but my size and shape are represented all over the place, she tells me via email. When you're below a size 16, you're pretty damn fortunate not only where fashion is concerned, but also as being classed as an acceptable part of society. I think there is some truth to that. I'm going to have to say there is a little bit of truth there. But acceptable, I would change acceptable to normal, which, like I said, which means normal expectations are put upon you. There isn't like, oh, that person's just really fat, so they're just kind of like out there, so I guess whatever. No, that's gone. Like I said, I feel like I have to be so appropriate all the time. And I don't think I am. Like, don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to say that. But it's like every time I'm not, it's like boom, boom, boom. You know, it's like, oof. Like, I'll get a bad stare, or someone will be like, you know, or anything. Like, and I'm a kind of sourpuss because I'm not happy, and I'm not fake, and I'm not demure. You know, I'm not necessarily like really extremely rude. Like, I'm a very introverted person. I don't yell and stuff, like I don't do that. Sometimes I feel like it. Like when that one BITCH was trying to accuse me of stealing. I wanted to go off on her so bad, but I didn't, because I like going to that store and it wasn't worth it. It wasn't worth it. But it takes, you know, I don't act like a mess in public, but I am sourpuss, and I'm quiet, and I'm awkward. And, you know, people are not a fan of it. You know, but if I have a smile on my face and all this stuff, then people like me more. It's like, ugh, it's tough. Because, like I said, it's very, like, conditional, I guess. You're conditionally acceptable, which maybe that's how all people are that aren't hugely fat, but I don't know. I just didn't have to worry about it, I guess, or I didn't think about it. You guys can let me know, I guess, but yeah, I'm like, ugh. Because I am really fucking awkward a lot of the time. It's awful. It's really bad. Like, it's not like, oh, it's just Poindexter. It goes to Poindexter mode, and it's like people will be like, hi, da-da, and I'm like, hi, you know, it's awkward. And then sometimes I have these interactions, and I'm just like, oh my God, that is so horrible. And I just don't think, I try to like just pretend it didn't happen, you know, basically, because it's awful. And I don't think it's ever going to go away. That's why I always die when people are like, you're not really introverted. I'm like, no, I am. I really, really am. Like, ugh. Anyways, okay. Anyways, I notice I have to be like hella acceptable. Okay. But if I am, then yeah, sure. You're likable. You know, if I wear a smile on my face, then people like me more. But if I don't, then people judge. You know, it's just weird. I don't know. Maybe this probably sounds so weird to people who are like, duh, but I didn't have that. It didn't matter. Ooh. It didn't matter how I acted. I was like invisible, or I was like, you know, the freak show or whatever before when I was bigger. So it didn't matter. It just didn't matter. I don't know how to explain it. Matters now. It may always matter now. So I don't know. I do wonder if there is an aspect of people who are hugely fat where they do not want to face societal pressures again. So it's easier for them to not have to worry about being acceptable. I personally, I have to worry about it now. I have to consider it. It's like, do I want to be inappropriate or, have a sourpuss face or something? Or do I not? Because if I am, I'm going to have pushback, So I don't know. It's just another way of looking at it, I guess. But I do agree there is less, you're not as separated from the pack when you're a small fat, but you're also not being fawned over or any of that. That does not happen either. So, like I said, I just feel like your behavior or being appropriate becomes such an important part because people see you with such a lucidity and so clearly that if you do act inappropriately or in a way that is not perfect, you're very much judged for that. That's what I will say. And there's not much forgiveness for anything. And I think this phase, it could be difficult for people who are people pleasers. So just be aware of that and try not to let it get to you. I'm trying to, but tell me why I was like, I don't know, I feel like my video yesterday was too bitchy. And I'm like, I don't think it was. But I wonder. It's weird. It's so weird, you guys. Anyways, it's not always easy to buy the things you want or avoid abuse, but it's not a struggle by any stretch, unlike size 16 plus, more specifically over a 22. For Smith, it's important to recognize herself as an ally to the community rather than a focal point. She has no qualms with self-identifying as fat, but she does feel that her experiences as a smaller fat means she should not be at the center of fat acceptance combos. I would never say that a size 14, 6-foot, leggy, hourglass-shaped women aren't representative, just that they're bloody everywhere. It doesn't stop me being able to provide a space for discussion, but it does mean that my opinion isn't and shouldn't be the dominant voice in the conversation. Yeah, she's definitely very, some of these women, they're super close to mid-size. Very close. That's within the hair. A hair of mid-size, barely fat. Barely. I mean, it is subjective, but yeah. Although a lot of people might look at Smith and not see fat, she tells me fat is a pretty big spectrum, and it has to start somewhere. Her words mirror the notion that all fat women's experiences are legitimate, whether they're small fats or big fats. After all, when we grow up being told that any kind of fat is bad fat, we grow up believing that any kind of fat on our bodies is bad fat too. Despite being a size 12 to 14 on top and a 16 on bottom, Awasti has still dealt with body image issues. She recalls being able to shop at straight-size shops that sold stretch fabrics but not fitting into pieces from trendier stores. I was obsessed with fashion and models, she tells me, which led to a series of ED and excessive exercising. After she injured her knees and wasn't able to walk for almost 3 weeks, I realized my self-hatred needed to stop and my journey to self-love and acceptance began, she says. To tell somebody whose body, even if that body is a smaller type of fat body, that their experiences with ED, excessive exercise, fat shaming, body shaming, or body image issues in general are invalid simply because they aren't that fat is unfair to that person. To deconstruct fat phobia, we need to tackle all the layers of it. So whether you're the kind of fat that can fit into a size 14 at a fast fashion store or the kind of fat that struggles to squeeze those lovely rolls into that fast fashion store 3X, chances are your body type has been shamed. Although we should always be self-aware enough to acknowledge our privileges in this world and self-aware enough not to identify as fat when we are very clearly thin, I believe we should also be self-aware enough to acknowledge where society and culture are doing us wrong, all of us. Having friends and acquaintances above a size 26, I absolutely realize how much worse fat shaming in particular can be for those who possess no thin privilege whatsoever. I can understand the resentment some of these people might feel when a smaller person who hasn't experienced the same levels of marginalization comes around and claims the same marginalization. This shouldn't, however, mean that anyone's marginalization is unworthy of discussion. Acting as such will only create divide in a movement that's at its strongest when banded together. So they were trying. It seems like they were trying to unite. Even like 10 years ago, this was a problem. But I don't know. Sometimes I find myself struggling with certain aspects of like the anti-FA side too. Like, I think I'm going to talk about that more so later, not necessarily now, but there are just things that I observe. But I guess as a little nugget or a sort of spoiler for next year, what I will say is I find a lot of people who have lost a lot less weight, they're very dramatic about it. And I don't know if they're doing it to kind of build up their social media or something, but they tend to over dramatize their experience with weight loss. And the issue I have with it at its crux, or like at its base, is that it terrifies. I don't think they understand how terrifying their over dramatization is to people who are very big and have so much more to lose. Like, when I hear somebody who lost 60 pounds act like they had to go to hell and back to lose that 60 pounds, everybody in their life treats them totally different and everything is totally insane now and they just hate everybody who used to make fun of them and all this stuff. I feel like it would have been so terrifying to be inundated with that type of content as a super morbidly obese person trying to lose weight. And I just feel like it's over dramatized. And so that is a criticism I have that is kind of similar to the fat acceptance side. It's a little bit of a mirror, but it's something I'm going to have to explore as I get to mid-size and beyond. So you guys can expect that for next year for my girly pops and boily pops. I will be covering some of that in 2025 as I get to mid-size sedan. We're still small fat though, so I'm going to try to cover as much as I can of this topic while I'm still here. But thank you guys so much for watching. I appreciate you so much. I appreciate especially the December crew. You guys are the realest. You guys are the ones. Y'all are it. Y'all are fam. Y'all are bae. Y'all are everything. So I will talk to you guys tomorrow. Have a good rest of your day, night, etc. Peace.